Round 1. Fight!
And this is. And this is. DNF Duel was released for Nintendo Switch in mid-2022 and has received a few patches over time, but for Nintendo Switch 2 there has not yet been any information about a possible update. But despite everything, it is a fully functional game for the handheld console, and today we take a new approach to this game and see if it is still playable, or if it is fighting for its survival. DNF Duel may not be in the same league as the Street Fighter series. There has been some criticism of the game, with some saying it's too simplistic, a game for beginners, and that the character's abilities rarely require difficult button combinations. Some have even claimed that the game is completely dead, but I wouldn't go that far. The game may not have the largest player base, but it's still possible to find people to play with online. Feel free to subscribe to my channel and give the video a thumbs up. Let's go! So let's start with an overview and see what options there are in the game. You can play story mode, where you get to know the characters in depth. There's arcade, which is like a tournament. There's survival mode, where opponents get stronger over time. And finally local match, where you fight against friends on the couch. You can also play online, in a ranked system or regular matches. So it's a game with a lot of options. When it comes to performance, there is no question that this is a stable fighting game on the Nintendo Switch 2. The frame rate is stable at 60 frames per second. I've tested using different characters in different environments, and every time the answer has been the same. 60 frames per second, almost all the time. It's a game that contains a lot of animated effects. I'm referring to all the attacks that each character has access to, and all the backgrounds that contribute to a livelier environment. And regardless of which ability I used, I'm actually a little surprised that everything flows so well. Rarely or never do I see anything affect the outcome of the matches due to a poor frame rate, because as a whole this feels like a very stable game that is well crafted by the developers. And here are a few more sequences. The developers still haven't implemented rollback netcode in the game, and probably never will. Instead, it's been replaced with a delay-based variant, and in my tests on the Nintendo Switch 2, I actually have to say that based on the online matches I played, I never experienced any major problems, regardless of whether I won or lost. Everything flowed as it should, at least it felt like it, but it's hard to know if the opponents I faced experienced it just as stable as I did. It probably should be so, as the delay-based variant should provide a fair and equal experience. From my perspective, the matches felt fair, and maybe the delay-based variant works relatively well anyway. But from a technical point of view, rollback netcode should be superior compared to a delay-based system. The advantage of rollback is that the game's delay is minimal, so even if one of the players has a bad connection, the system can correct so that the experience is more fair. Compared to delay-based, one of the disadvantages can be that both players experience delay, even though only one of the players suffers from delay. In other words, the game waits for both players' input and adjusts based on the current situation. This means that both players can experience delay and the game becomes sluggish. I also want to point out that there is an online feature in this game, but you have to subscribe to Nintendo Online to be able to play against others. And even though the game is a couple of years old, it was surprisingly easy to get matched up with another opponent, so it seems like the game still has a following. I usually didn't have to wait more than 30 seconds before I found an opponent, so it meant that you rarely had to sit and wait. It was just to find a match and then I was off. What struck me, however, was that almost everyone I met had, I think, a Korean or Japanese name, which makes me think that is where most of the players are from. Of course, this doesn't have to be true, but it was at least an observation I made, and I noticed that when I chose to play at a later time, that is when it's early morning in South Korea and Japan, well, then I couldn't find anyone to play against. So my guess is that if you want to have a better chance of finding people to play with, it might make sense to play when they are awake. So DNF Duel works perfectly fine on the Nintendo Switch 2, but there are some question marks. And in a time when the biggest and best games are coming, the question is whether DNF Duel is up to the task. In competition with games like Street Fighter 6, it is not entirely inconceivable that DNF Duel will have difficulty maintaining a sizable player base, and perhaps the community that keeps the game alive will be extremely important for new players to have the opportunity to experience the features the game has to offer. That said, it is still a playable game, even on the Nintendo Switch 2, but the future looks uncertain for the game, and I don't even know if the game's developers have any plans to update or in any way make the game more timely. We will simply have to wait and see what happens. That said, feel free to subscribe to my channel and give the video a thumbs up. Have a good day. See ya!